Welcome to Politically Basic. I'm your host, Kyle Campbell. As we always do, we're breaking down the basics of all political issues and current political events so that you get to decide. I'm thrilled to have Christina Meredith on the show today. From surviving abuse and homelessness to becoming Ms. California, a U.S. Army officer, writing the remarkable book Cinder Girl, and becoming a national voice for foster youth, Christina's story is one of grit, grace, and purpose. So this week on Politically Basic, she's going to share how faith, hard work, and hope helped her rise from trauma to triumph. And wow, do we need to talk about the foster care system in this country. We're going to get to that and more right now. Christina, welcome. I am so glad to have you on the show with me today.
Thank you so kindly for inviting me. I'm looking forward to sharing all things foster care so your audience can know the importance of fighting for this issue.
Yes, it's so important. We're not talking about it nearly enough. You are one of our nation's top voices and authorities on this issue, so I'm really looking forward to what we're going to learn today. I read your book when it came out, and it really impacted me greatly, I have to say. You've been on my list for having you on the show for some time now. Let's just let my audience hear from you. Your story is pretty wild from what happened to you when you were young all the way to, the journey that's led you here to advocate and be such a powerful and effective voice in this space. Can you just share a little bit about your story and that journey up to this point?
Yeah, so I grew up here in Northeast Florida. I'm in Jacksonville, and I was put in foster care during high school after years of abuse and trauma. The state finally took all 8 of us away. And I was put in long-term non-relative placement until I was 18. I was going to East High School at the time, and I was in ROTC, excelling in ROTC. I tried for all the ROTC scholarships, but I didn't learn to read until I was a freshman in high school. Like, I didn't go to 7th or 8th grade. My biological mother had taken me out of school. So I was, mediocre in academics, not because I wasn't trying, but because I truly had some hurdles to get over. And so when I applied to these scholarships my senior year, I didn't get any of them because my peers were academically superior to me because they had normalcy and stability and parents who loved them, who taught them to read and do homework and all these things, right? So I graduated high school. I was very proud of myself for doing that. And I was determined to be everything that everyone said I couldn't be. So even though I didn't get my RTC scholarships to become an officer in the military then, I worked really hard for a long time to ensure that, I could be that. And after I graduated high school, nowhere to go, didn't have money for college, moved into my car, became a valet attendant at Casa Monica Hotel in St. Augustine. This 5-star hotel, had just gotten my driver's license and I'm valeting these gorgeous, very expensive cars. It was always so funny to me. Like, okay, here am I, 18 years old. I'm valeting this Mercedes. This guy definitely wouldn't let me valet if he knew I just got my license 2 weeks earlier. Yeah. And then at night I was serving, I was a waitress at Village Inn, turning pies for those who left the bar at 2 a.m. Mm-hmm. I did that for a hot minute, and while I was living in my car, I started writing Cinder Girl. I started writing my story, knowing that I wanted other kids to have better, because I was dealt a bad hand, but I wasn't a bad kid. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a majority, right? A very small percentage of foster youth truly have criminal issues, right? A lot of that is funneled through. Like, if you're in foster care, you end up in the prison pipeline, you end up on the welfare pipeline because of circumstances that are outside of your own control. I mean, most foster kids who are in juvenile detention were in foster care and there's nowhere else to put them. So they're just putting them in juvie. I mean, I know you've heard this.
Yeah.
It's appalling. So, for me, I knew these issues. I was experiencing it myself, and I was just committed to not letting that be the end of my story. And so writing Cinder Girl, living in my car, dreaming big dreams, because we're in America and we can do that. And I remember dreaming I was going to change foster care, and I was going to go to school, and I was going to go to college and I was going to commission as an officer and I was going to do all these things and write my book and speak and, you know, be somebody. Because isn't that what we all want to be? We want to be somebody worthwhile. And so there I am, 18, with all these dreams in a journal, living in my two-door Chevy Cavalier. Called her Sunny. She was a bright yellow school bus. And I just never gave up, you know, showering at the beach excess. I'll never forget those moments. You won't ever forget living in that kind of destitute poverty. And I think even more so, and I could be wrong because I'm not a male or I'm not a man, I'm a woman, but even so much more as a woman, my femininity was so robbed from me during that time. Just the shame of it all. So lived in my car for a little bit over a year, saved up enough money, moved into a little apartment I shared with another girl from the church I was going to. And I just began my uphill battle to achieve my dreams. Ended up moving out to California just a couple years after that because I had heard that LA was the land of dreams. I don't know where I heard that from, but I did. Mm-hmm. I moved out and I ended up in Ventura. And I'm living in Ventura, and it was a culture shock for me because I had never left Florida, like literally never left the First Coast outside of ROTC competitions where they put us on a Navy school bus and drove us and then drove us back. So, you know, driving through Texas, driving through the west, you know, side of the country and into Ventura was just like, are we in America still? Yeah. You know, so young, and it was beautiful. Became a barn hand out there. I was a barn hand at a couple barns in St. Augustine, and then became a barn hand out there. And then I got another bar job. I was also bartending. Got a bar job at the Venice Whaler. It's one of the most famous, dirtiest beach bars in Venice Beach. And I was bartending there, writing Cinder Girls still, and working on speaking. I was speaking about foster care. I was speaking about mental health. I was like getting myself out there, right? Growing my wings because that's what you do in LA. Mm-hmm. I was walking through a Whole Foods, minding my own business, dressed like a hot mess. Okay. Not cute. And this pageant recruiter comes up to me and says, you should compete in Miss California. And I honestly thought that, I mean, here's this man who's wearing an Italian suit and leather shoes and looks very nice. And it's like, you've got the wrong girl, buddy. I just left the barn from picking up the uniform. I'm not your girl. So never went to prom. Like I worked a double at Firehouse Subs that night because I was working at Firehouse Subs through high school until I got my valet and pie job. And then my bar job after that. But yeah, so he came up to me and he was adamant. No, you need to compete. Here's my card, you know, whatever. And I just threw it in my bag and just chalked it up to this guy, you know, maybe, you know, hitting on me. Yeah, I just didn't think anything of it, honestly, because that was not my path. I was there to write my book and get a book deal, talk about foster care, reform foster care, right? Not do a pageant. I was not a pageant girl. I was ROTC. I used to have a spitting contest with my first sergeant, like not pageantry material. But then that night, I was like, let's check this out. So I went online and I looked up the Miss California pageant and I realized that, boy, oh boy, this was a real opportunity for me, you know, step into to reform foster care, to do something worthwhile. And I just remember feeling this profound sense of, you have to do this. This is it. This is your chance. And so I was committed immediately, like whatever I had to do to win Miss California, I was going to do it. And I had a boyfriend at the time, and I write about this in my book, and I talk about it often because it's so funny, but I had a boyfriend at the time, and I told him that I was going to compete in Miss California, and he laughed at me. And I broke up with him. Yeah. I did.
Good decision.
I signed up to compete in the city competition, Miss Ventura, to win the city crown, because you have to win a city crown before you can go to state and win that crown. And so I put in my hat for Miss Ventura, competed in that, won the city crown, and then, you know, for several weeks, went around Ventura and several other cities, you know, on the west side of LA to raise money. They're like, hey, and I had my one sheet and I had my little face on it. And I was like, I'm going to compete in Miss California. And my platform is foster care. We're going to reform foster care, reform foster care. This. Give me your money. I'm going to change the world. And all these businesses, for whatever reason, were like, okay, here's my money. It was great. A lot of people donated gowns and all kinds of things that I needed that, I didn't even know that I needed. I had never been in pageantry, which, by the way, is a very expensive sport.
Right. People don't realize how much it takes. I mean,
Yeah,
you can't really even hold a job while you're doing that. It just takes so much time and yeah, the money, the outfits, the travel. Incredible.
I, you know, worked really hard to get all the things I needed for the Miss California pageant, and Ventura and the surrounding cities really supported me, and it was great. Got all the things that I needed, and I show up to this pageant, and I realize I'm way out of my league here, okay? Because these other girls had pit crews of people who were taking care of them, doing their hair, doing their makeup. These girls had multiple gowns. I had one, right, that I was given to me from a seamstress from one of the gown shops in Ventura. Like, it wasn't, my gown wasn't $20,000 like most of these girls' gowns are. So I immediately was like, my little pink, purple pink caboodle. I was like, oh no, we're in trouble. But hard times don't get me down. So I went in there with a smile and with a mission, and came out successful. Again, against the odds. And I think that goes to the tenacity of most kids in care. They want the odds, right? They don't want to be the statistic. Nobody wants to be that. But I think foster carers particularly want to beat the odds, because so many people are convinced that these kids, especially the older kids, older than 15, 16, 17, they're the worst kids, right? They don't want to be adopted, and they've got behavioral issues and this and that. And it's like, no, these kids are resilient, and they're capable, and they're smart. And so when Miss California just reaffirmed all that for me, and my platform was reforming foster care. And ever since then, I took that little opportunity, and I have, maximized every opportunity after that.
Brilliant.
To continue to make change for our kids, because these kids are worth it. They're worth the effort. They're worth the fight. Now I've spent the last decade in policy at the federal and state level, and lots of change there, lots of momentum there. We've got some great bills coming out on both the Democratic and the Republican side, which is really unheard of. So it's the bipartisan support that's going on right now on the Hill is truly new, and I'm all for it. Like, let's do this.
Yeah, that's really encouraging. I want to thank you for sharing that, and thank you also for just being such a brilliant example of someone who was given difficult circumstances and rose above them. And you have such a great outlook and attitude about things that I'm sure were extremely difficult in a number of levels. I'd love to hear from you just about the foster system in general right now as it stands in the United States. Can we talk about maybe some of the statistics and have you really paint the picture of what the care system is right now in the United States?
Yeah, so I'd say in the last decade, the statistics in foster care have fluctuated very little. I mean, usually you've got around 400 to 500,000 kids in care annually, and then the statistics get pretty grim after that. You've got, most of the girls in care end up pregnant, most of the boys in care end up in prison. Truly, the foster care system is a pipeline to the prison system and the welfare system, and it's doesn't have to be that way, and it's an egregious offense to our kids in care. America's orphans, America's most vulnerable children deserve better outcomes, and I think people who are on the front lines of this know that and are working hard for that. So a snapshot by and large right now, we've got close to 400,000 kids in care, same statistics of 20 to 25,000 kids aging out and ending up homeless. And then you've got around 50,000 that get adopted each year, which is amazing. I think the adoption part of foster to adopt is critical and huge for foster care kids. It's a great way to break the cycle. And I'm a huge proponent of policy that supports that. The new credit, I do want to touch on this. The new big bill that just came out supports the adoption refund in their taxes, meaning if they adopt a child, they get all of that back. I think that's amazing. Like that, what right? So there's a lot of things that are coming out of the Hill right now that are so great, again, on both sides. So I look forward to seeing how that all that pans out. But yeah, I mean, it's grim. The statistics for
Mm.
our kids is awful. Only 6% uh, graduate high school.
Wow.
I mean,
Oh, that's
same
devastating. Yeah. I
same
mean, well,
for
you said too, your education was almost non-existent. You didn't learn to read. Your biological mom pulled you out of school. I mean, was anybody checking on that? Is that what led to you being put into the system?
yeah. So my story is unique in that I had knocks on the door starting at 9 years old. I mean, we had abuse reports and social workers coming at the door when I was 9, and it wasn't until I was 16 that I was finally taken out of, the cycle of
Yeah.
abuse. So for me, my story is a little bit different. I mean, the state really failed me for many years and my siblings. Um, but yeah, I mean, that is why it's so sad. I think about it, where were all the adults for me during that time? Maybe they were trying. I look at my foster care case file, it's like this big. It's in the other room. I probably should have grabbed it. But I look through the abuse reports and it's just like all these people are calling in on my siblings, on my siblings, on my siblings and me. And it's just, it all meant nothing for a really long time. And by then the damage was done.
Yeah.
Now the
Right.
damage will be undone. I don't say that to say that's a forever thing because it's definitely not. Um, Kids can heal, and the human spirit is
Resilient.
resilient, yes, and we're tenacious, and
Mm-hmm.
we're like trees in the wind. We can bend
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
break. So yeah, I think the snapshot of kids right now is still the same. It hasn't changed much. COVID made some things problematic because a lot of kids went underreported or not
Mm-hmm.
reported because people weren't going in and checking. Um, and then the aged out kids weren't getting their resources. They were just disappearing, you know? So 2020 really, really, really did some damage for our kids in care. But right now things are same. California, unfortunately, is still the highest state in the country with foster care kids,
Mm-hmm.
uh, followed by Illinois, which is new. Usually it's California, Texas, and Florida. Now it's California, Illinois, and Florida, and then Texas is following. But Texas has done some really, really hard work in their foster care system, and their numbers are coming down dramatically. So
Mm-hmm.
they're working really hard.
Well, I want to
So
hear about what they're doing when we get to kind of the solutions part of this discussion, but I want to help people understand too how this whole thing works. So I think that there's a grave misunderstanding of sort of all the, who, what, where, when, and why of the foster system here in our country. But let's talk about the where for just a minute. We know that the state family law system and child welfare, CPS, there are a lot of problems. It's riddled with issues. Kids that shouldn't be removed sometimes are for reasons we're dealing with in today's day and age, like a family won't help a child transition, and we're hearing about children removed from the home for that reason. And then on the other end of it, as you were just saying, you have children who really do need to be taken out, even for a time, just removed from a biological family or the main home. And the threshold for doing that now just seems ever more elusive. But where do things stand across the country in terms of where the kids are? Are there group homes still? Because I know here in the state of California, they passed AB 403. And I'm very intimately familiar with AB 403 because I helped to open the first short-term residential therapeutic shelter here in the state, which was sort of the new version of the group home because they were so problematic. So can you update us and educate us on what the group home situation looks like across the country right now?
the foster care system isn't run federally.
Mm-hmm.
Every state gets to run their DCF, gets to run their CPS, however they choose. And a lot of the states intermingle federal and privatized. So that in of itself makes things problematic, right? Including data, getting data the same way,
Yeah.
because every state is different. So when you're talking about group homes, yes, group homes are still very much a big part of the foster care system throughout every state. Now, if your state has changed language for the policy of a group home works or is formalized, that's going to take a different shape. But most states are still operating using group homes. Now, I know they're trying to pull away from that. Preventative services at the federal level and at the state level, people are trying to push more money into preventative services, to keep our kids to help our kids get better outcomes. Some group homes have been shut down. Some group homes are amazing. I have visited some of the best organizations in the country. They're private and they're amazing. I mean, there's one in Boca Raton and there's one in Naples particularly that are group homes. They're living facilities for kids in care and aged out care, and they're incredible. They're like little mini college campuses.
Right, yeah.
So when people think group home, yeah, you can have the stigmatized group home where it's like some dilapidated, I hate to crap on the Army because I'm still in the Army, but a lot of the Army buildings are riddled with mold and they're riddled with all kinds of, code violations for health and for safety. And when you think about, group homes, that's what the visualize is that. But a lot of group homes are more like mini campuses now, right? A lot of private organizations have upped the ante on how the standard of care for our kids. Do some of those group homes still exist that are very unsavory? Sure. But I mean, it takes a long time to standardize one thing, right? Especially when, again, each state runs their foster care system differently and it's intermingled with the private sector. So it's always going to be like this. It's not going to be standardized just yet. Now, I believe that the federal government can play a role in standardizing the standard of care and how we operate with things for our kids. And again, like I said, the bills that are coming out from both sides that I just looked at, are pretty amazing, especially ending the homelessness crisis that's going on. And so,
that's a great place. That's a great place to move over to talk about the homelessness factor in all of this. How does that play in? I mean, you experienced homelessness as a teenager when you were, moving through this process. Is it prevalent, and what's going on in terms of that aspect of this issue?
There is several bills that are up for ante. I actually pulled them up so I can read you one. It's called the Homeless Children and Youth Act of 2025. This one is, the lead sponsors are Senator Katie Britt, a Republican, and Senator Angela Alsobrooks, a Democrat. This bill basically removes barriers to federal programs, including HUD, to allow transition-age youth to create consistency with definitions of what youth homelessness looks like, so they're eligible for more Fed dollars. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And I really appreciate that legislators are focusing on the TAY housing, so transition age youth. I thought about it as 18 to 21, but it goes more than that, doesn't it? Is it 18 to 25? 24. Okay, 18 to 24, which is such a critical time because we don't magically become self-sustaining adults when we turn 18. And I think that it's taken years. I mean, you can speak to this so much better than I can. But from what I know in my experience and my knowledge on this is that we have to help make that transition as supportive as possible, especially for kids coming out of either a group home or they've been in one of these short-term shelter situations. You can't just spit them out into the real world and expect that they're going to have a place to live and have a job and get insurance and do the whole thing. And so that is wonderful to hear that bipartisan legislation is being moved forward. And I hope that it moves through the process quickly and starts, supporting these kids as soon as possible, because that's a huge need.
Well, these bills that are coming out, there's another one I'm going to share with you guys here in a second, but these bills that are coming out really are, I mean, it's a bipartisan, it's so easy. I mean, it's a non-issue. These are our most vulnerable kids on both sides. Forget your ideology. Our kids deserve this help, right? So the next one after that, changing that language really is important because the language matters in policy to allow dollars to move. The next one is the Youth Homelessness Guaranteed Income Pilot Program. So this one makes me excited because my lived experience is an aged out foster youth, right? I was homeless. It was humiliating. It was hard. It's something that I, have grown from. It's made me the woman that I am today, but it's not something that I want other young kids to experience.
Yeah.
And so this bill would be a pilot program to ensure basic income needs are met to those transitioning aged youth, which is huge. What you were just talking about, making sure that their insurance is paid, making sure they've got health insurance, making sure, they're handling their student obligations, as, if they're getting student loans or they can pay their tuition, all of those basic things that you get that support when you have parents and grandparents. This pilot program would literally take a group of kids and say, okay, what are the outcomes if we support them with all of their basic income needs? That to me is amazing, because I know those outcomes are going to be great. When you have stability of income and you have stability of your needs being met just on a basic level, you can thrive. You're not worrying about surviving, and these kids aren't having to choose between going to work and going to school. They can do both, which was a problematic issue with the way that Medicare language was just written in that bill, because they upped the hours, saying that if kids weren't full-time school, they didn't qualify for those federal dollars, which I think is such a travesty. I mean, these kids are already juggling so much to demand that they're in school full-time. How are they going to work?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
How are they going to provide for themselves? So these things, people need to keep talking about this specifically for these aged out youth, to get these better outcomes. So this program makes me excited, and it's good because leadership on the Hill are listening. They're like, okay, so yeah, maybe we shouldn't require them to go to school full time to ensure that they're going to get their dollars. Maybe we should allow them to go half-time so they can also work and provide for themselves, so they can get all the support they can get, because the more support they can get within their community, right? Because a lot of communities and a lot of organizations are supporting foster youth now, which is amazing. The private side is thriving, right? I have seen more organizations take care of our kids in small ways and big ways in the last decade than ever. And I feel like the last few years, the federal government and the state legislators are finally catching up to that. Like, okay, we really need to do preventative dollars in the front end to make sure our kids aren't ending up in the back end in the prison and welfare system. Because at the end of the day, that just costs taxpayer dollars.
Right, exactly. Well, that's so encouraging to hear, because usually what we hear through the media is everything that's going wrong with how our tax dollars are being spent. States and communities are just gushing all of our dollars, and they're going to places that are unnecessary or inappropriate or whatever. But this is absolutely where that money should be going. And you made the point, it saves money in the end. So you're doing good on both sides of the issue. And that is really, really encouraging to hear. I know, too, that this has an effect on the issue of trafficking, because when you're making an environment so difficult for a teenager, an 18-year-old, or even, one of the older kids, a 24-year-old, to be able to exist. I mean, it's tough when you have a support system. It's tough when you were in a bio home. It's tough to go out there and get a job and be able to afford to live. The cost of living today is so prohibitive. And so then you're expecting, somebody aging out of the foster care system to be able to do that with no support, no resources, questionable at times education, and resume. They're going to be vulnerable to people who come along and say, hey, I've got you. I'll take care of you. And then you're trauma bonded and you're sucked into this world. Then your life is no longer your own. And so in what I have learned and read about trafficking and the work that I do locally, these foster kids are powerfully exposed and vulnerable to being picked up by traffickers.
I've read statistics over the last few years of the percentage of, I hate to say human trafficking. I know that's the language, but it's the rape trade to me, because this sex trafficking, sex is consensual. So as a survivor of child rape, I hate the terminology that, the authorities use and the policy legislators use. It's not sex trafficking, it's the rape trade, because that's what it is. But aside from that, kids in care are foster care children make up the highest percentage of that target population of child survivors of the sex trafficking. So it is extremely concerning and disturbing to me. And why is that? Well, you spot on the nose. Kids are vulnerable, right? How are they being taken care of within the system? Are they being tracked? How many kids did we lose in 2020 from the COVID pandemic when everything shut down?
Well, that was another question I had for you, because
I'll tell you, we We lost track of thousands of children. Okay, that is a fact.
Well, then
That's a
we
fact.
have the other issue of illegal immigration. We have to talk about those kids because we don't know where they are. I know they're not being counted in part of the foster system because we also cannot find them.
Well, I know that government agencies are working hard to retrieve and recover children. That is one of the biggest things that
Yeah.
this administration is doing. And I know even right now, which is, I mean, it's probably not going to be surprising to your listeners, the DEA is getting
Mhm.
involved in foster care because the opiate crisis is at such an extreme level that the DEA is going into these drug houses and doing these missions, and they're having to take multiple children out. And so now the DEA is now heavily involved on the west side of the country
Mm.
in the foster care system because of the opioid crisis. So it's like you've got these three-letter agencies that are working hard to get our kids and take care of our kids. And that's going to take time, and that's going to
Mhm.
take resources, and that's going to take policy that supports that. And then it's going to take states, again, remember, foster care is both a private and a public entity. It's intertwined, it's very married together. It's going to take states going, okay, what are the resources that we need for these kids now that we have these children in care? What do they need? And where are the therapeutic services to support them so they become healthy,
Mhm.
functioning adults that get back to society, right? And not end up in the welfare prison pipeline.
Yeah.
So it's very, very concerning the trajectory of our kids in care. Um, but it is like one bite. You can't eat the elephant at the whole time.
Right. Yeah. Well, I
All right.
mean, that's a really good point, actually, because I'm sure you have experienced this so many times. But for someone who, I mean, had nothing to do with the foster care system growing up, I was very blessed to have a very stable, loving home. But choosing to throw myself into this work, there are so many points where you become overwhelmed. It becomes so discouraging to feel like it's one step forward and 100 steps
Oh,
back
yeah.
in fighting this. And there are just a million problems surrounding it. It's so complex, and you've touched on so many of them. I mean, data collection in these populations is nearly impossible, and you can't advocate for policy change if you're not showing the data, and you can't get the funding if you don't have the numbers. And you have good homes and you have bad homes, and you have stigmas and you have success stories, and they're working at cross purposes for making points. It is incredibly difficult, and I want to take a second and just commend you first and foremost, but anybody working in this space, because you have to just give yourself a moment, take a deep breath, and then get back at it. Because you've said this a couple times now, and you're so right. This is the point. These kids are worth it. Every single child's life has value and matters, and we can do so much better for them. So I want to talk to you about the solutions, how we do better in the system and for these kids. You've mentioned some excellent legislation coming through the pipeline. I'm thrilled to hear it, and really happy with those legislators, because even when there is an issue that seems like it should have bipartisan support, and that's an easy one to attach to. Anti-child sex trafficking is one of those issues. You would think this is a no-brainer. Everyone on both sides of the aisle can reach across and work together. It doesn't always happen that way. So I'm really glad to hear that people are reaching across and working together. But let's talk about, in your estimation, with your expertise and knowledge here, some of the ways that we can, at all levels, community level, federal, state, through these systems, work and advocate for change. What do you think needs to be done?
So I think a lot of the work is being done. I think the less the federal government is involved, the better for our kids, right? So the more the community gets involved on boots to ground level, right? The more these organizations, these private organizations are building these campus life facilities, the more that these organizations in the community are doing these building backpacks for kids in care, or making sure their Christmas happens, or making sure they have clothes, helping them with finance classes, and helping them through high school, and helping them do college or trade school, whether they want to be a welder, whether they want to be an engineer. I think the community should be handling those things. That's a community level position to take. Then once the community, and a lot of communities are doing this,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I think it's important for these communities and these organizations to realize that with their hands together, they can accomplish more. The silo effect is dead. Your organization is doing one thing, but when you partner with the 20 other foster care organizations that are doing something, it's like a house. You're an unstoppable force, and now you're providing wraparound services in partnership. And partnership is key throughout anything in life. You cannot be an island. So I always say at the base level, the community level, that's boots on the ground, for them to reach out to their counterparts, their colleagues, their other warriors on the front line, and band together and figure out how they can partner in a way that flourishes their own organizations, but most importantly helps the kids. Then after that, you have to have policies at the state level that support these organizations, that get them the dollars that they need, that get them the permissions that they need to take care of these kids. There's a lot of red tape for living, right? If they're under 18, the red tape that an organization needs to have facilities for kids, it's very grueling. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be. It should. But we need these organizations, checks and balances, there needs to be, I think, for checks and balances, there needs to be an ombudsman, truly, a true ombudsman who just does foster care throughout the state. I don't think we have one. I think there might be one attached to DCF and Tallahassee, but do they go to all of the organizations in the state to check? I'm not sure. Maybe we need a team of ombudsmen who just does checks and balances for these locations that have our kids.
We had someone in our county, and she was part-time, one person part-time for an entire county of, 500,000 people. And so she bless her heart, she was wonderful. But you can only do so much with that many hours in a week. And so I think that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, so at the community level, you've got organizations who are tying themselves together to help our kids. Then you've got at the state level, you need policy that supports language, that supports these organizations, that supports these kids in ensuring that they get the dollars and the support that they need, like foster to 21. Now it's foster to 24, depending on if you're in school or working full time. I think that's great, right? So policy matters just as much as the organizations do. Then at the federal level, I think what's happening now needs to continue to happen. And the Annie E. Casey Foundation has been and is doing incredible work on data and statistics throughout the country. They are single-handedly pulling in data, and they're working so hard to get all this data to show the need. And so the highest of fives to the Annie E. Casey Foundation. Thank you for retrieving all of the data. It's very hard work, but they are doing it to prove the need to the federal government to write policy that supports the states, that supports the private organizations to give kids what they need. And so, that's how that flows. But the three things that I always say that could immediately help kids is mandatory trauma therapy, right? That's going to be huge. Mandatory, if they're in high school, then mandatory education training, right? Mandatory elective activities. Like they're in high school, they need to be in band, they need to be in football, they need to be in ballet, they need to be in choir, whatever. And the state needs to support that with dollars, right? And organizations can also partner and piggyback on that. Because if kids in high school aren't getting the exposure to other things other than surviving, then they're going to graduate maybe, right? If no one's even tracking to support them, what are they going to do? They need the exposure. They need the purpose of being on a team. They need the esteem building from competing in something. I mean, ROTC changed my life because of that. It gave me purpose. It gave me power. It gave me a place to be. It gave me battle buddies. It gave me friends, right? So I think kids in high school need to be in extracurricular activities at school. Trauma therapy. And then the third thing I think is we need to press harder on adoption. There is a big push out there the last several years for adoption, and it's great, but kids are aging out, and they're ending up with no families. They're ending up alone. And it doesn't need to be that way. There are plenty of families out there that can adopt a child and be with that child forever.
Yeah, I read the latest statistics on this, and tell me if this is ringing true for what you know. You mentioned about 500,000 children available to foster, or children who need a foster home. or to be adopted in this country, and that there are over 2 million families waiting to adopt children. Is that right?
I have not heard that, but I will look into it, see if there's validity to that, because if that's true, that's absurd. I will say policy needs to come out. And the one I shared earlier about the tax credit to adoption, when you get that back, that's amazing. I mean, that's a no-brainer to me. I think they should have done that a long time ago. I'm thankful they're doing it now. But does it need to be easier for children in foster care to be adopted? Yes. It's extremely expensive and hard and emotionally very, very taxing, because these kids get brought into your home and you fall in love with them and you want to adopt them. And then the bio uncle out of nowhere says, I want to adopt a nephew. It's like, and the court entertains that for a bit. And then when they find out that's not going to work out, then, okay, the kid gets taken away, then the kid gets back into you, and you're like, okay, we're going to try to adopt you again. And then they're going through the process and they're paying all of these lawyer fees and they're paying all this emotional and financial investing to this sweet child that they love. And then out of nowhere, the grandma does exist and she comes down and she's like, I'm going to adopt the nephew. And then that does, it's like those stories happen often. And it's like, I don't believe, and there's people who are going to be upset by this, but I'm entitled to my opinion. I do not think that reunification of the bio family is the end all be all. I just don't.
Yeah.
It's very problematic to have that stance. I think it always needs to be the best interest of the child. And the bio family is sometimes not always the best interest of the child. So if there is a loving family that has proven over time to the state that this child is well cared for and loved and they're on their way to adoption, I don't think a bio family member should be able to come in left wing and say, oh, but I don't think that's fair. I think it's a disservice to the family and most importantly to the child who has now already had stability, already had a path of love, and stability is the most important. Now you're ripping that stability away from them. And now they have to try to build a bond with this person they didn't even know existed. And I think that's problematic for a lot of reasons. But most importantly, it's discouraging to other families, because what's the toll of getting your heart ripped out of your chest after you fall in love with this child?
That's it. Yeah. And then, for families who do this, they don't always just adopt or foster to adopt one child. So if they go through a nightmare, heartbreaking experience with one, you're really kind of slamming that door in their face for considering stepping out and being vulnerable and doing it again. And we need them to do that. They're set up for it. They're having success doing it. We want to encourage them to continue giving and serving and opening their home in that way. And so you're right. It is terribly problematic across a lot of issues there. Talk to us a little bit, while I've still got you here, Christina, about the church's role in this, in the foster care system and adopting.
I want to say the adoption issue is a state issue. So there's not much, sure, the Congress can push out some policy that, fancy language, but really at the end of the day, the adoption from the foster care level is a state issue, and states need to take it seriously, and state legislatures need to come together and find language and policies that support foster parents in adopting children easier. That needs to be a priority. So I just want to say it is a state issue. Churches can play a great role, like any other private organization within the state, right? So if a church wants to support foster care, then they need to partner with DCF or CPS or whatever organization is handling the state system for child welfare, and offer their services, whether it's having parents come to the church. Foster care parents come to the church one night and they do dinner, so parents can get a break, right? They can have a moment and they feed the kids and they feed the parents, and maybe they've got like books and backpacks and pens and things to support these kids going to school. Churches can do all kinds of things. Churches can teach classes. They can get certified by the state and they can teach classes on how to become foster parents. That's something that churches can do. The church can play a huge role at any level, small or large, depending on what they want to give. They just need to partner with their state child welfare service in order to do it. But a good church can do a lot of good in their community. They could, if they wanted, ease the burden of the child welfare system in their city or their town.
Yeah, there's that famous story of that church in Texas that asked their congregation to step up and foster every single child in their community needing a home, and they did it. everybody stepped up, and it was this just really beautiful, expression of what community looks like there. So I love that. And you made another excellent point that I want people to understand is that these foster families and people who decide to do this, they need support. It's not just the child getting support in that way. The families, the parents need your support too. And sometimes that's just checking in and saying, hey, what do you need? Or how can I help? And if you're not sure, just, offering, a break, a meal, providing some fun activity for those kids.
Flowers for mom to breathe.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many ways we can do it.
Mom,
Mom wants some.
Go sit in the van and read a book.
Totally.
And dad too. So it's like, I think the church at any level can support families that are in the foster care system. And I think it's important that communities together. It's really a community issue. Yeah. Teamwork makes the dream work. It's cliche, but it's absolutely true. It's fact.
Well, you mentioned being siloed, and the pandemic really just cut us all off from community so badly. We're still working our way back from that. And so I talk about this a lot because it affects what I do all the time. I mean, we stopped talking to each other, let alone talking politics. But in an issue like this and needing to rely on your community so much, we need to do better. And so I think that's the encouragement that I'll give people listening and watching this, is that we need to get out there and check on our foster families and encourage our church and our community organizations to be doing more and just get ourselves in there. So, but you are certainly the expert, and we're grateful for every word you're offering us. So I'll let you close us out with final thoughts and how you want to either encourage people or the one thing that you really hope that people take away from this conversation.
I think to close to your audience, you can get involved in foster care on any level. You can give financially. That's a low burden, right? $20, $30, $50, $100, $50,000, whatever's in your wheelhouse, you can do that. Very low burden. You can partner up with churches who are doing a lot of things like certifying parents to become foster parents, and they're doing foster nights, or organizations like foster backpacks. You've got if you Google in your town or city, wherever you are in the United States, if you Google foster care, or go on your little Google Maps and type in foster care organization, you're going to get a ton that pop up. Mm-hmm. Read about them, go to their Instagram, make sure they're legit, and then give whatever they're asking for. Are they asking to build a backpack? Build a backpack. Give a backpack. Are they asking you to come to a week camp so kids in foster care can enjoy a summer camp and you can give your time as like a camp liaison? Then do that. Do you feel called to open up your home to children in care? Beautiful gift. Become certified and do that. Do you want to adopt these children? Go through the system within your state and work with your guardian lions and work with your caseworkers and do that. Really, I think it's all hands on deck. These American children deserve the American dream. And the only way they're going to get it is if we adults continue to fight for them so they have the opportunities that they deserve. Because every child deserves to dream big. Every child deserves to become who they were destined to be. Whether you're in a normal family, in a healthy family with stability and housing, and you're making good grades and you're going to college and you're doing all the things your parents want you to do, or whether you were dealt a bad hand and you're going to school and you're trying to graduate and you want to go to college or you want to go to a trade school and you want to be bigger than what the world says you are, but you have no help. It's our job to make sure that child, that young man, that young woman has the help so they can dream big just like other children. Yeah. So I'd say get in the fight. This fight is not going to end anytime soon, but we can sure hell of a make a difference, right? So, and these kids are worth it.
Absolutely. Very well said. And you nailed it. Everyone can do something. Yep. I love that. Well, Christina, I can't thank you enough for coming and talking with us today and sharing so much, legislation, information, resources, knowledge, and wisdom on this issue. We appreciate you, appreciate everything that you're doing. And everybody go read Cinder Girl. It is remarkable, and see how you can get involved in your own community, in your state, and make a difference for these wonderful kids who deserve the world.
Yes. Thanks for having me, Kyle. You're
Thank
great.
you. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Politically Basic, where we break down the basics of all political issues and let you decide. Be sure to follow us at politicallybasic.com and at politicallybasic on all socials so you don't miss a single episode. We'll see you next time.